Maybe the problem why we're feeling stuck, restless, or anxious is because we're thinking too much with our soul and not enough with our spirit. We've been taught for so long to think about our goals, our future, where we see ourselves in 5 years, where you see yourself in 10 years, what is your career going to look like at that point in time. Ever since we've been in preschool, kindergarten, what do you want to be when you grow up? You want to be an astronaut, you want to be a fireman, you want to be this, you want to be that. And maybe that's the problem with us in our current state of restlessness, because we've been taught to think about ourselves so much, and we're ever rarely taught to think about ourselves less. There is a mindset or a way of life where you stop thinking so much and you just start living in a divine presence. I remember when I made my first film, Between Sins. It was one of the most transformative experiences in my life. Because imagine for a moment where, on a day-to-day basis, maybe you get 15 to 20 questions asked of you in a day. And that, I'm just throwing out a ballpark number. It could be more, it could be less. But imagine tripling or even quadrupling that number overnight. That's what it's like being a director, where let's say you go from being asked on a day-to-day basis 20 questions, and 20 questions that, some may be more thought-provoking and others might be a simple yes or no. But with each and every one of these questions, there is an emotional attachment involved in order to make a decision, because we know when we make decisions, it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of logic and emotion. That's how you make, or that's how we come to a decision. But imagine now that instead of having 20 questions, you now have 200 questions plus in a given day, maybe even more. That's what it's like being a director, and that's especially so when you're a director of independent films, where you're wearing multiple hats, where not only are you the director, but you maybe are also the art design department, and you're maybe even a cinematographer, or you just wearing so many hats that normally you probably wouldn't wear on a set or in a situation where you have ample amount of money to hire people to do these roles. When I was directing my first Between Sins, I was that person who had to answer all these questions and wear multiple hats. And during this process, which was maybe about a month and a half or so, I noticed something within the second or third week, maybe. I noticed that I was getting so many questions asked of me that I no longer had time to really process or weigh my emotional value to the question being asked, because I didn't have the time nor the energy to think about each question with too much emotional value placed on it, as well as logical value. So I had gotten to the point where emotion had completely been subdued. And it was only, my only focus or goal was what is to the good of the project? What moves the project forward? It's not how you feel. It's not how I felt about something. When you're working on a film set, it's just so many personalities, it's so many different opinions. There's conflicts, which is healthy. There's tension, which is healthy, because everyone wants to achieve the same goal. But there comes a point as a leader where your emotion and how you feel about personalities or creative disputes you can't weigh that with emotion. You have to weigh that with logic. So there came a point where I call it, I, I kind of obtained like this, at the time I was calling like this superhero ability, in terms of I could actually see my emotional value. I could literally see it dissipate in nanoseconds because had no time or energy to worry about how I felt about something. It would, the part of me that is me, that we associate with us, our emotions and how we feel about something, that part of me had completely left. And all that was left was the divine, or the absolute good of what is best towards the project and everyone who's a part of the project. That's all I cared about. And that showed me something. That showed me the power of thinking about yourself less. Because I didn't even notice what was happening until the project was over. And it was almost like I had an out-of-body experience. I was just like, where am I? Where have I been for this past month? It was like time didn't even exist. My ego didn't even exist. Anything that, again, that we associate with who we are, our emotion, our personality, I was completely unaware of that. And you know, it's funny, my pastor asked me maybe about a month ago, he was like, yo, Carlos, Los, you know, people call me Los. It's like, I had a strip club scene in the film, and he wanted to know my thoughts of how did you navigate that strip club scene, knowing where your walk is with God. And what I told him was, Pastor, I didn't even know that these women were naked. I didn't even notice that they were naked because the self of me no longer existed. So it could have been 30 women walking around naked and I didn't even notice. And that experience and that understanding, that again, it didn't even dawn on me until after the project was finished. I was like, oh shoot. So Eden still exists today. We could still tap into a space where we're not walking this line between good and evil, but all we see is good. And a way to tap into that is to think about ourselves less, not in inferiority, but in surrender. If we surrender our lives to what is good and take how we feel about things out and think about ourselves less, because when you think about emotion, that's a soulish aspect of us. But the Spirit of God is connected to our hearts. If we think with our spirit, our heart, with the godly part of us more, and think about the soulish part of us less and what we want in every situation, how it's going to benefit me, how it's going to make me better, what is this going to do for me? Yeah, you winning, but I feel like I'm losing. That's soulish emotion. If we could learn to live in a state of constant surrender, where we think about ourselves less, we are able to tap into a power that has been here and remains since the Garden of Eden. It hasn't left. We've just been thinking about ourselves more instead of less.